Hi everyone, my name is Christopher Shane Priya, and I'm here to talk to you a little bit today about the value of recycling. Now, most of American society has been involved in recycling in one form or another. Just about everyone can tell you stories about how they recycle cans or bottles or paper. Usually this is done through their local trash service or at a drop-off point near their house. However, the complexity of recycling is quickly outpacing those traditional methods. One of the best ways to look at this is through the proliferation of electronic devices. And we're talking cell phones or computers, televisions, DVD players, just about any electronic device you have in your house. Now, these devices have fundamentally changed our lives in addition to the way we communicate, but because of the nature of processing them and disposal, there becomes much more dangerous precedent set with those types of items if they're not disposed of correctly, as opposed to just cans and bottles like everyone knows about. And it's because of that now in many states, such as here in Colorado, it's actually illegal to not dispose of them in a proper fashion. So we're going to look at a few things today. We'll be looking at the traditional recycling methods we know about, like cans, bottles, paper. We'll also look at electronic device recycling, which is called e-waste, and then we'll look at just a couple of the possible solutions to these problems. So let's begin by looking at those traditional recycling methods. Again, we're looking at things like cans or bottles or plastic, things like that. Just a really quick overview, and these statistics are from the EPA's own website. If you take an aluminum can, now, aluminum is the number one most recycled item in the United States. It actually makes up less than 1% of all of our landfill space. But that's a good thing because it takes about 500 years or so for one aluminum can to actually decompose through natural methods. And the turnabout in recycling is that if you recycle even one can, then you get enough energy that would power a television for, say, about 3 hours, or the equivalent of half a tank of gasoline. So if you take that and you think about how much energy you could get just by recycling a 12-pack of soda from the store, that's not an insignificant amount. If we look at paper, one Sunday edition of the paper in the United States takes about 500,000 trees. If you extend that to stuff you get in the mail, like junk mail or magazines, you're looking at 1 billion trees per year that are used just for those purposes alone, which is why recycling becomes so important, especially if you consider for each ton of paper that we're able to recycle, that saves the equivalent of 17 trees. This can produce enough energy to be the same as 160 gallons of gas, or can take 250 pounds of carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere, which if we're concerned about global warming and things of that type, then that's very important as well. If you look at glass, kind of similar to aluminum cans, a glass bottle can take over 4,000 years before it decomposes on its own if it's not recycled. And there's enough glass bottles that are thrown away in the United States every year that would fill a 100-story skyscraper. Now, to consider the savings you might get by recycling, all those glass bottles are 100% recyclable. There's no form of glass that they can't turn into another product of one type or another. And if we could take all that extra refuse that we throw away in glass, we could power 45,000 households in the United States for 1 year just off the savings of that energy. And then for plastic, this considers plastic cans and bags, styrofoam cups, anything that's used petroleum-based in order to create it. About 86% of all that is ultimately thrown away, and 1 ton of those items recycled could power 2 households for an entire year. So as you can see, there's a lot of savings to be made by recycling, considering resources are becoming so scarce. So now that we've looked at some of these more traditional recycling items, let's consider a newer and possibly more dangerous one in the long run, which is the e-waste epidemic. Now, e-waste, again, is electronic waste, throwing away your electronic devices, cell phones, computers, or what have you. Now, to take into consideration what it takes to create, just say, one computer and one monitor, it requires 530 pounds of fossil fuels, about 50 pounds of chemicals, and 1.5 tons of water to make one computer and one monitor. So that is not a small amount. Now, the actual amount that is thrown away is relatively inconsequential at the current time, as far as our total landfill space, only fills up about 2% of our landfills with electronic devices, which again, remember, in most places is illegal. But one of the things about the electronic items is that the process that creates them makes them very toxic when they're placed in the ground. In fact, 70% of all of the toxic waste in the United States consists of electronic items. And you consider there's a lot of precious metals that go into those devices, such as gold or silver, platinum, palladium. These all go into the ground if they get thrown away and aren't recycled. They're very toxic, and if you look at a money equivalent, it's like throwing about $60 million away every year just in precious metals alone. Now, when it comes to recycling, as you can see, we have about 2.4 million tons or so approximately that we throw away every year, and about 2/3 of that is not recycled. So obviously there's a lot of room for improvement in that particular area. Now, when it comes to recycling, it is certainly more difficult than the traditional services. A lot of companies will take your electronic items, but they may require you to purchase expensive disposal kits, which you have to put the item into in order for them to be shipped away. Or their services, they may not be convenient. It's not as easy as taking it out to the corner and sticking it out there. You have to actually transport it to someplace. Maybe it's not even close, and a lot of people would rather just try and sneak it into the regular trash. Plus, you have to consider these places may take them, but that doesn't mean they necessarily recycle them. In a lot of cases, these items are shipped to third world countries who've sold their land to us for landfill space, and we deposit them over there, and they make that ground toxic instead of ours, and they consider that the fair trade-off. So now that we've looked a little bit at the e-waste problem, let's look at what the solutions are to all of these together. Now, when it comes to the traditional items, those processes have been fairly streamlined. Like I had mentioned, 100% of all glass can be recycled. Pretty much about 90% of cans, paper. We've been doing it for decades, and we're pretty familiar with it. It's just a matter of actually doing it. The e-waste is where it becomes more of an issue. Now, you have to look at the methods of recycling. In some cases, if it's not convenient to throw them away to get them recycled, you can donate or reuse the particular items. There are places like online sites eBay or another one called Usell, where you can get them your electronic items and they will reimburse you in cash or gift cards for doing it. Now, they're not altruistic. They will mine these things for those precious metals, and they make a fortune doing it, but they will also ensure that everything is recycled properly as part of that. You can also donate your used electronics to your local school or businesses or Goodwill. Things that way they'll get reused as opposed to thrown in the trash. Similar process comes with cell phones. You can donate those to the military. There's cell phones for soldiers or March of Dimes, which will take old cell phones and repurpose them and give them to our soldiers out in the battlefield. So that is certainly something useful to think about if you're getting rid of those particular items. As far as if none of those are an option, if you just need to get rid of it, then you want to make sure that the recycler you use is equipped to go ahead and convert those items and not just ship it to someplace or bury it in a landfill and hope that it's not noticed. So some of the things to think about if you're selecting a recycler, to identifying what type of recycling you need, what the recycler can provide, verifying that their performance is what they say it's going to be, and then select the recycler. So it doesn't want to just be you pick one out of the phone book. You want to do some homework and some research and make sure that you're comfortable with who you're giving it to and that they will do what they say they're going to do. So given all this is just a brief overview of the nature of recycling, a little bit what goes into it, and a lot of times you can just get, it's important for the environment, and that's why you should go ahead and recycle, but a lot of times people don't know those figures or statistics that show you exactly how important it can be and how damaging just throwing away your cell phone can be if it's combined with everyone else doing that. So recycling has moved far beyond just the canned bottles and paper, and unfortunately it's still not just as easy as leaving your electronic devices out on the curb for pickup like it is your cans and your bottles, but it shows that it's very important to do so because of the danger of those particular items, and that's where the creative process has to come in, to finding places to donate or reuse those particular products. Fortunately, society has fairly well embraced recycling, So this may be something that is just taking some time to get going as technological products are more and more part of our household. Because if we just throw them away in the ground, they'll lead to large toxic piles. And if we don't find a way to recycle or reuse these products, then the earth and subsequently ourselves will ultimately be the ones to suffer the most. Well, I thank you for your time.
Very good. Very good.